Who do you think you can trust 100%? Someone will say that they can trust their friends, parents, spouses, and so on, and they will be right. But life has taught me to trust only myself, period. My wife has betrayed me terribly. Each morning, I start with a run. The fresh air, empty streets, this is my time when everything feels right and orderly. Today's morning was no different from others. Anna, as usual, left early. Her work at the school starts early, and she mentioned yesterday that she had an important meeting with the parent committee. When I returned home from my run, a satisfied smirk still played on my face, thinking about the day ahead. Opening the door, I noticed Anna's phone lying on the hallway table. It was strange. She rarely forgot it, especially if she had to be at work early. Picking up the phone, I hesitated for a moment. She might have left it in a rush, and if I hurried, I could bring it to her before heading to the office. I was already heading toward the door when the phone screen lit up with a notification. It was a message, but not from a colleague or a friend. The name Eric flashed on the screen. My heart started beating a little faster, and my eyes immediately fell on the text, which I read without even realizing how tense I had become. Darling, same time as usual? For a moment, the world seemed to blur before me. I stood there, holding her phone, as if glued in place. The phrase from the message kept echoing in my head. Darling, same time as usual. Questions flashed one after another, but there were no answers. Who is he? What were they planning? And damn it, how hadn't I noticed this before? Time seemed to freeze. I don't know how many seconds or minutes passed as I tried to process what I saw, but in the silence of the house, I heard the sound of a car approaching. A cold sweat broke out on me. Anna. I quickly placed the phone back on the table, took off my shoes, and went to the living room, trying to act natural, as if I had just returned from my run and seen nothing unusual. The door opened, and Anna appeared in the hallway. Honey, you're home? I forgot my phone, so I came back, she said, closing the door and hanging her bag on the hook. I swallowed hard and acted as if nothing happened. I walked up to her, gave her a soft kiss on the cheek, and tried to keep my voice casual, saying, Good thing you came back. Now the day will surely be lucky. I didn't even notice you'd left your phone. Grab it and head to work. Have a good day, love. She smiled, and I went to the bathroom, trying not to look back. I closed the door, turned on the water, setting it to cold so that icy drops would lash against my skin, sat on the tiled floor, and just stared at my hands, feeling the freezing pain slowly creeping inside, where something was already cracking and crumbling. How? I whispered, unable to take my eyes off the wet tiles. How did I get here? I tried to focus on the icy water running down my face, hoping to calm the chaos in my mind. My name is Michael. I'm 42, a realtor helping people find their perfect homes, and I always tried to create a perfect home for myself. For 15 years now, I've been married to a woman who's been not only my wife but my closest friend. Anna and I met almost by chance. I was helping her parents buy a home here in Silver Pines. They were moving to our town and wanted to settle somewhere close to nature where they could enjoy peace and fresh air. Anna had come with them, a tall, slender woman with wavy chestnut hair cascading down her shoulders. Her brown eyes sparkled with interest, and her smile held such warmth that I found myself thinking I was looking at the sun. She was 22 then, just out of university and searching for her place in life, while I already knew I had found mine the moment I looked at her. Anna was graceful, but there was an inner strength to her. Standing at about 5'9", with a finely sculpted figure and a gentle curve at her waist, she seemed to me the embodiment of femininity. I remember catching her gaze as I explained to her parents which houses suited their budget and needs, and I saw that she was following every word, as if she were trying to decipher me. That evening I couldn't resist and asked her out for coffee. To my surprise, she agreed, and from that day on we started meeting regularly. By our third date, I realized I wanted more. The closeness between us felt almost inevitable, as though everything was taking its natural course, and I couldn't imagine wanting anyone else. A few months later I proposed, and we've been together ever since. We built everything from scratch: a home, a family, trust. We had a son, Toby, who's now 12. All this time, I believed I'd built a family that wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Yes, I'd been married before. My first marriage burned me, leaving a mark I couldn't forget. 13 years ago, my first wife cheated on me just 3 years after our wedding. I even remember telling Anna about it when we started dating, explaining that I wasn't willing to go through that again, that I needed sincerity, only honesty. Anna was a comfort to me back then, telling me it hurt her too, and now I sit here in the bathroom, feeling everything fall apart. How could this happen? I said aloud. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the icy water trickle down my cheeks. Everything had been good. Or had I missed something? Sitting under the cold water, I tried to understand. Who is this Eric? I had never even suspected that Anna could have someone else. She was always the one I trusted implicitly. She had never given me any reason to feel jealous or doubtful, and she seemed content with her job. Anna taught literature at the local school, and as far as I knew, she enjoyed it. She loved preparing for classes, discussing books and projects with colleagues. It seemed that the quiet life in Silver Pines suited her perfectly. In our day-to-day life, there was no sign of this dark shadow. Anna was attentive, a loving wife. We were close. The intimate side of our life remained the same, without any signs of cooling or distancing. I could have sworn that there was nothing suspicious in her behavior. But still, someone had sent her this message, and the name was entirely unfamiliar to me. I quickly dried off, got dressed, and headed to the bedroom. Somewhere here, among her documents, there was a list of the school's teaching and support staff, in case she ever needed to call or contact someone. Opening her drawer, I started going through the papers, something so simple, yet my hands were trembling as I searched for the list. Found it. Slowly, I ran my eyes over the names, reading each one. Useless. Among the school staff where Anna worked, there was no Eric. I put the papers back and closed the drawer, feeling the throbbing pain in my temples intensify. For a moment, the thought flashed that maybe this was just a mistake, a random message not meant for her, but I dismissed it immediately. A mistake couldn't explain my love. No one would call her that unless there was something more between them. Same as usual today? Those words left no room for doubt. If Eric isn't a colleague, then who is he? Could it be a pseudonym, a cover for someone else? I turned all possible options over in my head, but each one only caused more pain. Sighing, I gathered the papers and headed to the kitchen to take something for the headache and try to pull myself together before work. And then I returned to that message again. Same as usual today? It sounded like a plan, like something settled and familiar. And then it hit me. What if I could follow her? Maybe she really would go somewhere after work, or even during it while I'd be occupied at the office. A couple of days ago, Anna mentioned she'd be home late because of paperwork. This was my chance. I quickly pulled myself together, trying not to dwell on all these heavy thoughts. I had to stick to the plan. I'd stop by the office, talk to my boss, Harry, and tell him I urgently needed a day off. Maybe even more than one. Who knew where this investigation would lead me? When I left the house and headed to the car, I caught sight of our neighbor, Caitlin, standing on her lawn with a garden hose in hand, watering the front yard. Noticing me, she waved with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Michael," she called out, trying to be heard over the sound of the water. "How's it going?" Trying to look as calm as possible, I waved back and nodded. "Hi, Caitlin. All good. Just work, you know. And trying to stay in shape. Running in the mornings." I added a quick laugh, hoping she wouldn't notice the tension. "Well, good for you. I keep telling myself I need to get into fitness too, but I've been lazy lately," she replied with a warm smile. "And how's Anna? I haven't seen her lately, and she hasn't called me. Must be busy too." "Yeah, she's working a lot. Everything's usual," I replied, keeping a neutral smile on my face. The words came out with difficulty, but I knew I had to avoid raising any suspicions. Caitlin nodded approvingly and returned to her watering, waving me off with a light gesture. I hurried to my car, hoping I hadn't left any hints behind. Sitting in the car, I took a deep breath and started the engine, feeling the tension building. Now everything depended on whether I could make it through the day calmly, hold myself together, and wait for the right moment to find out the truth. Sitting behind the wheel, I glanced over at Caitlin, who was still busy with her garden. We've been neighbors for a few years now. Caitlin and her husband, Ted, moved into our neighborhood when Toby was about 7. They have 2 sons, and our kids hit it off from the very first days. In summer, the boys are always playing together in the backyard, riding their bikes down the quiet streets, or disappearing into each other's game rooms, with Caitlin and Anna often involved closely in their activities. As for Ted and me, we never really got close. We'd meet on the street, exchange a few words, and that was about it. Caitlin and Anna, though, clicked right away. They'd go to school events together, sometimes shop, or have wine at home on Friday nights. I guess Anna doesn't have many close friends, so I was always glad she had someone nearby she could talk to and trust. Caitlin wasn't exactly the type to go unnoticed either. A couple of years younger than Anna, she was petite, fit, with short blonde hair, styled in a simple but stylish cut. Her green eyes, bright and lively, always seemed full of energy, and her lean, athletic build showed her love for fitness. Even when I was in a bad mood, her friendly, almost encouraging look could lift my spirits. I let my gaze linger on her for a moment, but quickly snapped back to reality. What was I doing here, sitting around? I had a plan. Taking a deep breath, I headed off toward the office. I had a clear plan in mind, and today was going to be the beginning of some answers. My office was located in downtown Silver Pines, in an elegant 3-story building designed in a classic style. The red brick walls and large white windows with thin frames conveyed a sense of reliability and respect for tradition, perfectly in line with our company's philosophy. Around the building stretched a tidy flower bed with neatly trimmed bushes and small trees. Inside, there was a spacious lobby with a high ceiling, light marble finishes, and large paintings of city and nearby landscapes on the walls. This place carried not only years of work, but also a certain pride for me. Here, I felt I could genuinely help people find their place under the sun. I parked in the small employee lot and walked in, greeting the security guard and a few colleagues at reception. "Hey, Michael," someone called out from behind the counter. "How was the run today?" "Already got it in?" "Of course. Never miss a day," I nodded, trying to mask my tension. "Unlike some people," I added, winking at my colleagues, aiming to joke as usual. "Well, you're our top runner," someone laughed, and I smiled, trying to keep up the appearance of normalcy. Ascending the stairs, I walked to the end of the corridor, where my boss Harry's office was located. Harry Lane was a sturdy, good-natured man with short gray hair, neat mustache, and a penchant for tradition. His office, much like Harry himself, exuded a sense of business-like rigor and order. An oak desk, large leather chairs, and walls adorned with diplomas and photos of successful deals. Harry always paid close attention to his employees' work, served as a reliable mentor, and knew how to connect with each person. I knocked and entered. "Michael!" Harry rose from his desk, extending his hand with a smile. "Good to see you. How's everything?" "Good morning, Harry," I replied, shaking his hand. "Well, the day started out unusually." He raised an eyebrow, giving me a keen look, and gestured to a chair. "Unusual? Sit down. Michael, has something happened?" His voice was filled with concern, but retained a touch of businesslike firmness. I might need to take today off, maybe a day or two." I felt uneasy even saying it, but Harry didn't wait for explanations, and immediately asked the question I'd hoped he wouldn't push. "Is it urgent? Family issues?" I nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Come on, Michael, what happened? If something's wrong, don't hold it in. We've known each other for years." His voice, always calm, sounded slightly softer now, and I felt a weight rising in my chest. I couldn't stay silent, and I had to admit, this morning I saw a message on Anna's phone. There was a strange message. I swallowed, feeling the dull pain finally released by the words. "I don't know who he is, but what it said, Harry, I just can't wrap my head around it." Harry looked at me, holding his breath for a moment, and nodded, processing what I'd said. "Damn. Michael, this is serious. You need to get to the bottom of it. Don't keep it bottled up." He leaned closer and said in a quiet, empathetic tone, "You know what? There's a great little restaurant just 5 minutes from here. Silver Grill. I know the owner, it's a nice place, and a great spot for breakfast, to catch your breath. Let's go, and we'll have a proper talk in a relaxed setting." I sighed, feeling my anxiety slowly replaced by determination. "Maybe that's a good idea," I said quietly. "Thank you, Harry." "Of course, any time, Michael," he said, giving me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "I'm driving today, so let's go, and we'll talk it all over at breakfast." I agreed, and we headed for the exit, knowing that this conversation at the restaurant would be my chance to finally put into words what was tearing me up inside. Harry and I arrived at the restaurant, a small yet popular spot called Silver Grill, with a colorful neon sign and a window display showing cozy wooden tables and shelves with green plants. The building looked like an old structure, with beautiful wrought iron window details and well-kept brickwork. All of this gave the place a special, cozy, traditional charm, which probably attracted the locals. We walked inside, and I looked around. A spacious room with tall windows and cozy decor, wooden panels on the walls, soft lighting, and vintage brass lamps on the ceiling. Quiet music played in the background, and the air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pastries. Everything here seemed designed to make each guest feel at peace and enjoy a sense of privacy. Anna and I used to love this place, and often came here for a romantic dinner, but it's been a long time since I was last here. Ah, those were the days. Harry led me to a secluded table by the window where we could talk privately. Just as we sat down, not a waiter but the owner himself approached us. A tall man, around 35 to 40, slim with a light stubble and a confident gaze. "Hello, Mr. Lane." The owner greeted Harry with a smile. "How's it going?" "All good, Mr. Walker. Great to see you. Everything here is as perfect as ever." Harry shook his hand. "This is Michael, my colleague." The owner, whom Harry had called Mr. Walker, nodded slightly to me and we exchanged a handshake. "Michael, pleasure to meet you," he said in a calm but attentive voice. "So, Mr. Lane, what would you like us to prepare for you today?" "For me, the usual, pancakes and coffee." Harry smiled, folding his hands on the table in a familiar way. "Best pancakes in town, I know that for sure." "I'll do my best not to disappoint you." Mr. Walker chuckled, then looked at me. "And for you, anything special or the same?" I felt his attentive gaze, almost as if he was assessing something, studying me, but I brushed the thought aside. Probably just professional interest. The same for me, please, I replied, trying not to give it any thought. Great. It'll be ready in a few minutes. Mr. Walker nodded slightly again and left us alone. Harry looked at me intently, a genuine sympathy in his gaze. Michael, this is all tough. I can't even imagine what you're feeling right now. He began sighing. But tell me, what are you planning to do? How do you plan to handle this? I looked out the window, at the street where the soft morning sun was shining, and tried to gather my thoughts. I think I have no other choice but to follow her, I said quietly. She was supposed to be home late tonight. I'm sure that she was supposed to meet him. Harry frowned, shaking his head. I understand your urge, but, Michael, it's very risky. Acting on emotions, especially now. He squinted, as if considering something, and spoke cautiously. If you really want to know the truth, I'd suggest doing it wisely. Get a GPS tracker, install it on her car. That way you can track her movements without drawing attention. You'll see where she goes, and it won't create unnecessary scenes. This way you can find out where she goes besides work. A tracker, I repeated thoughtfully, nodding. That might actually be sensible. It's not only sensible, it helps avoid unnecessary mistakes, Harry insisted. You risk losing control, Michael, and if it turns out to be a mistake and because anything can happen, it's better to be safe. You're right, I admitted, realizing that a clear strategy was what I needed right now. I'll get a tracker, but today I still want to observe her myself. I promise I won't interfere, just see what happens. Harry sighed, pondering my words, then reluctantly nodded. Okay, if it'll help you. He looked at me intently, but with one condition. If you don't find anything today, tomorrow you go back to work and follow the plan we discussed. Buy the tracker and approach this more cautiously, without unnecessary actions. I agreed, feeling relieved to have a plan and Harry on my side. At that moment, Mr. Walker returned with a tray holding 2 plates of pancakes and 2 cups of hot coffee. He carefully placed them in front of us, his gaze lingering on me for just a fraction of a second. Then he left. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Harry thanked him. We started breakfast, and I caught myself realizing I had almost no appetite. But breakfast was supposed to give me some strength before I went out to pursue the truth, a truth I wasn't even sure I was ready to find out. After breakfast, I settled my bill with Harry, thanked him for his support, and watched as he headed back to the office, leaving me alone with my troubling thoughts. It was already close to noon, and I decided not to waste any time. I went to the nearest electronics store to buy a GPS tracker, just as Harry had suggested. As I entered the store, I noticed a sales assistant, a guy in his early 20s, who looked at me with interest as I approached the display. How can I help you? He asked eagerly, coming closer. I need a GPS tracker, something compact and discreet that I can install without it being noticed, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, sure, he nodded, guiding me to a row of small devices. Here are a few models. This one, for example, charges from the car lighter, and this one is battery-powered. It'll last about 2 weeks without recharging. Do you need help with setup? Yes, setup would be helpful, I replied, thinking it might save me some time. What's the best way to attach it to a car so it won't be obvious? Usually these devices are placed under the seat or attached under the dashboard, he explained helpfully. I can set it up and show you how to use it. I nodded, waiting as he completed the setup. The guy quickly showed me how to track the coordinates from my phone and activate the device. A few minutes later, I left the store, feeling the weight of the small tracker in my pocket, a device that could change my life. Once back home, I immediately set to configuring the device and figuring out how to monitor the route. That's how I spent the rest of the day. I kept testing the device, adjusting settings to ensure accuracy, checking for potential errors, and constantly wondering what I would say to Anna if my suspicions proved right. Every thought led to a new scenario. Doubts and grim thoughts accompanied me as I became more familiar with the tracker and resolved to take action. By 3 in the afternoon, I was ready. I changed into dark jeans and a t-shirt, regular clothes in which I wouldn't stand out. Moving my car a bit farther from the house, I called a taxi and instructed the driver to head to the school where Anna worked. "Please stay nearby. I may need you to wait for a while," I told the driver, handing him cash as I got out. "It could be a long wait, but I'll make it worth your time." The taxi driver nodded understandingly. Turning down the radio volume, and sitting on a bench under a tree, I prepared to wait. From this spot I could see the school entrance and the parking lot where Anna's car was parked. Time passed slowly as I watched her car, plagued by guesses. The hours dragged on. It got dark outside, and almost everyone had left the school grounds except for a few cars, probably belonging to staff staying for evening meetings. I checked the time on my phone. It was already around 7 in the evening. Then, finally, Anna appeared at the doors. My wife walked out of the building calmly, as if her day had been nothing unusual. No signs of hurry or anxiety. She scanned the parking lot, adjusted her bag, and headed toward her car. I returned quickly to the taxi, where the driver had closed his eyes, his head resting on the seat. "She's coming out," I said quietly, which made him stir. "Follow her. Keep it subtle so she doesn't notice." The driver nodded, started the car, and we set off. We drove through several streets, and I couldn't shake the anxiety. But something in her route was starting to alarm me. Anna's car was heading home. Wait. I sat up in my seat, barely believing my eyes. After a few more turns, we found ourselves on our street, where Anna, as if nothing were out of the ordinary, parked at home and went inside without even glancing back. "Damn," I whispered under my breath. She went home, as if there was no other place she needed to be. "Is everything all right?" the driver asked, glancing back at me. "Yes, it's fine," I replied, hiding my disappointment, and asked him to take me to my car. When I was finally behind the wheel of my car, one thought kept running through my mind. What if I had been wrong all along? When I returned home, it was around 7. Anna greeted me at the door with a gentle, calm smile, her face glowing with a kind of warmth that, in other circumstances, would have been a balm to my soul. She glanced at my tired eyes and said, "Hey, honey, I just made dinner. It's your favorite, pasta with cheese and broccoli tonight." I nodded, and as usual, Anna approached and kissed me on the cheek, adding, "Oh, by the way, Toby's coming back tomorrow evening. Mom said they'll bring him over themselves, so it'll be a real family reunion." I smiled, thinking it would be great to see Toby home again, with his infectious laughter and endless stories about new games and friends. Over dinner, Anna, as always, eagerly shared stories about her day at school, how one of the kids had brought in a puppy, causing a whole uproar in the classrooms, and how the teachers were discussing the upcoming school festival. Her face was as genuine and animated as ever, as if her world contained not a single shadow. "And how was your day?" she asked as we finished eating. "Oh, the usual," I replied, trying to keep my tone as casual as possible. "Work, colleagues. Just the routine, really." We laughed, and as I stood up from the table, I caught her gaze, where something fiery suddenly flickered. She took my hand and without a word led me upstairs. Since the day we first met, Anna had this special look that promised more than words ever could. Today, there was something nearly irresistible in her eyes, a burning desire, as though she wanted to reaffirm over and over that I was her choice, her anchor. When we reached the bedroom, she pulled me close with such intensity that I felt my thoughts and fears slipping away. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to forget the weight of my suspicions. Being close to her reminded me of those early days when we could barely wait to see each other again. Anna soon fell asleep, peacefully and deeply, while I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, filled with mixed emotions, a blend of resentment, doubts, and something warm but undefined. Finally, picking up my phone, I sent a message to Harry. "I'll be at the office tomorrow, as agreed." Leaning back against the pillow, I was about to fall asleep, but then I remembered the GPS tracker. It couldn't be delayed. The setup had to be completed tonight. Trying not to wake Anna, I quietly slipped out of bed, threw on a sweater, and headed to the car. I carefully secured the tracker under her car seat, checking it multiple times to make sure the device was firmly attached and stayed hidden. It took about an hour, but I needed to be certain that everything would work if she received another message from this Eric and decided to see him. When I returned to the bedroom, Anna was still peacefully asleep, her breathing even and calm. I slowly crawled back into bed, trying not to disturb her. Cradled by the silence, I finally allowed myself to close my eyes, feeling sleep slowly take over. It had been exactly a month since that strange morning when I saw a message on Anna's phone from someone named Eric. A whole month of suspicions, trails that led nowhere, and doubts that gnawed at me from within. But no matter how hard I tried to uncover the truth, every day, every GPS signal, every phone check showed the same. Anna was living the same steady life I had believed in for the past 15 years. The GPS tracker had been attached to her car for the entire month. I checked the route regularly. She drove to work and went straight home afterward, sometimes stopping by a store. On weekends, she stayed home, took care of chores, walked Toby, or spent time with us. Every day was predictable, with no deviation from her usual routine. It drove me mad, as if that message had just erased itself from her life, leading nowhere. After calming down a bit, I finally decided to check her phone. I scrolled through her messages, reviewed her contacts, scrutinized each chat's text, hoping for even the slightest hint of a connection to this Eric. But there was no Eric. Only her colleagues, friends, family. At first, this brought relief, but as the days went by, it began to feel odd, like I no longer knew exactly what I was looking for. Gradually, I started returning to normal life. Anna and I still shared regular intimacy, and when our weekends aligned, we spent them together, often with Toby, taking trips to nature or just staying home as a family. Everything looked as though nothing had changed, as if I had invented all these doubts. Anna acted as she always had, never once giving me a reason to doubt her loyalty. At work, everything went on as usual. Harry kept his word and didn't bring up that topic again. We continued working together as before, and it seemed that episode was slowly losing its significance. I even started getting used to the idea that it was all just one random message, a random word, as if I'd imagined it all and there was no message at all. After our intimacy, I lay beside Anna, watching her as she looked relaxed and serene. For a moment, the silence was filled with a cozy warmth, and, giving into that moment, I said, "Seems like we both have the weekend off tomorrow, right? How about spending it together?" I suggested, turning to her. Anna smiled slightly, tracing her fingers along the pillow, and nodded. "That would be nice. What do you have in mind?" "Well, Toby has been wanting to visit your parents for a while," I said, leaning closer to her. "We could take him there, and in the evening, we could go to that restaurant we haven't visited in, 6 months? The Silver Grill, remember it?" At first, Anna just nodded, but when I mentioned the restaurant, her smile faded slightly, and I felt a trace of tension cross her face, even though she quickly tried to mask it. "The Silver Grill?" she repeated, as if she wanted to make sure she hadn't misheard. "Yeah, why not?" I answered, frowning a little. We haven't been there in a while, and you said you wanted a night out." She sighed quietly, glancing around the room, then shrugged slightly. "I don't know. Maybe I could cook something instead? We could just spend the evening at home, just the two of us." "Wait, you don't want to go to the Silver Grill?" I asked, emphasizing the point a bit, not really understanding why her reaction was making me uneasy. "They have great food, and we haven't gone out in so long. What's the problem?" Anna held her gaze on me for a second, then suddenly changed her tone, as if something had convinced her. With a casual smile, she said, "No, of course, that's a great idea. Let's go to the Silver Grill if that's what you want. I just thought we could have a quiet night at home," she added, wrapping her arms around me. "You know, being with you is enough, no matter where we are." I returned her kiss, but something was bothering me. We wished each other good night and turned to our sides of the bed. But as I closed my eyes, I suddenly realized that her reaction to the suggestion had unsettled me. She wanted to avoid the restaurant. But why? Was she hiding something? As soon as Anna fell asleep, I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and quietly went into the living room. Opening the browser, I started searching for information on the restaurant's owners. Honestly, I didn't expect to find anything unusual, but when I saw a familiar name on the restaurant's page, my blood ran cold. Eric Walker. He was also the head chef. Everything started to fall into place. "Eric," flashed through my mind, and that fateful message resurfaced in my memory. "My love, same as usual tonight?" My heart raced. Moments came back to me when I noticed changes in Anna. About 6 months ago, our relationship had been full of fights. Anna was on edge, snapping over little things, and constantly seemed distant. Back then, I couldn't understand what was going on with her and was nearly giving up, not knowing how to handle the situation. But then, suddenly and unexpectedly, everything seemed to change. She became gentle, compliant, as if she had instantly forgotten all our disagreements. I remember how amazed I was by that transformation, but I was so happy I didn't ask questions. Now, as I thought about it, a disturbing picture started forming in my mind. I hadn't noticed how, in recent months, Anna began dressing up more often, wearing makeup, paying more attention to her appearance. At the time, I thought she just wanted to look attractive, and I didn't think much of it. But now, all of it felt different, as if she was trying to impress someone else. Then, I remembered our last dinner at the Silver Grill about 6 months ago. I recalled that we weren't served by a waiter, but by the owner himself, that same Eric, whom I had previously seen at the restaurant with Harry. That night, Anna was cheerful, but every time Eric approached our table, she would turn away, then sneak glances at him. I even noticed how she looked at him, and how he looked back. But I thought it was just simple politeness, nothing more. Now everything fell into place. I realized that the message on her phone from Eric wasn't a coincidence. More than that, I understood that the reason I hadn't noticed anything suspicious all month was because Harry had warned Eric. As he said before, the owner of the place is his friend. He knew I was watching Anna, so they changed tactics, stopped meeting altogether. Turns out, Harry was involved in this too. Damn, he even warned me, said I might make mistakes, advised me to be cautious, supposedly to avoid making things worse. In reality, he was helping Eric fool me. Harry, Eric, Anna. All this time, they hid behind my own doubts and fears. I stood in the dimly lit living room, feeling a wave of anger and humiliation wash over me. When I returned to bed, Anna was already asleep, her face peaceful as if nothing had disturbed her life in the past month. But I lay there, unable to close my eyes, as the events of recent weeks and how Anna had initially avoided going to Silver Grill now painted a clear, painful picture in my mind. The next morning at breakfast, I told Anna I couldn't go to the restaurant with her. I explained that I was feeling a bit under the weather and wanted to spend the evening at home to recover. Surprisingly, Anna didn't argue. Quite the opposite. For a brief moment, her face lit up with a quiet joy, though she quickly composed herself to hide it. She smiled, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, and said, "Of course, dear, if that's how you're feeling. Let's just stay home tonight. It'll be cozier that way." She kissed me gently on the cheek, and I kept a neutral expression when I responded. That evening, I attempted to find a private investigator to finally confirm my suspicions and, if true, to have the evidence ready for a divorce. But Anna was always around, asking questions, coming into the room, distracting me with conversations, and in the end, my search was unsuccessful. The next morning, as usual, Anna left for work before I did. I knew I'd spend today looking for a detective, but as I stepped outside, I noticed my neighbor Caitlin sitting on her porch crying. Her shoulders were trembling, and as I approached, I heard her whispering through her sobs, "He's cheating on me. He's cheating on me." I stopped, taken aback by what I'd overheard. Suppressing my own turmoil, I moved closer and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Caitlin, what happened?" I asked softly. "Are you sure?" Caitlin looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. She nodded, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady herself. "Yes," she whispered, covering her face with her hands. "Last night I went through Ted's phone. He was in the bathroom and I just couldn't resist. And then I found messages from some woman. She told him she missed him and wanted to meet again to relive that night. Michael, I feel shattered." I sat beside her, listening to her confession as something boiled inside me. Realizing Caitlin wouldn't judge me, I decided to share my own story. "Caitlin, you have no idea how familiar that feeling is. I'm not sure myself, but—" I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. "I have reasons to believe Anna might be cheating on me too." Caitlin looked at me in surprise, wiping away her tears. "Anna? Your Anna?" "Michael, but she's always seemed so kind, so honest. I'd never have suspected—" I nodded, bitterly realizing that was exactly how I felt. I couldn't imagine my wife doing something like this either. But I told her everything, about the message from Eric, my attempts to track Anna, her changed behavior, and my struggle to understand what was going on. Caitlin listened intently, and I saw her expression grow more serious. "I want to hire a private investigator, to have proof if my suspicions turn out to be true," I finished. I can't just let this spin out of control. I'll need a lawyer if it comes down to divorce." Caitlin sighed and nodded as if something clicked for her. "You know," she said quietly, "I've also decided I'll go to a lawyer today and file for divorce. I don't have concrete evidence either, but these messages, they're too clear, Michael. Sometimes intuition doesn't lie." We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our thoughts. Finally, I suggested, "Listen, Caitlin, what if we combine efforts? I could help look for a lawyer and a private investigator for both of us. We share a common goal and it might be easier together." Caitlin looked at me with something like gratitude and relief in her eyes. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered, hugging me. "I never imagined I'd be in this situation, and I'm truly sorry you have to go through it too." I nodded, trying to stay composed. "Let's just continue with our daily lives for now," I said. "I'll search for a lawyer and an investigator, and once I find something, we can figure out the best way forward." Caitlin nodded in agreement. "I hope these are just doubts, and that Anna hasn't betrayed you," she said quietly, offering a faint smile. I hope so too, I breathed, feeling the inner conflict between hope and the almost agonizing realization of the truth. We hugged once more, and then I stood up, heading to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat, I glanced in the mirror at Caitlin's porch. In that moment, I realized that we both found ourselves in a position no one would ever have imagined just looking at us from the outside. When I arrived at work, my entire day was dedicated to a single goal: finding a detective who could gather evidence for Caitlin and me. I spent the first half of the day calling agencies and searching for the right professionals, but my plans were constantly interrupted. Harry would walk into my office with annoying regularity, peering at my screen or asking questions, as if he couldn't take the hint that I was busy. Harry was watching my actions a bit too closely, almost as if he already knew I was hiding something. With every visit, my suspicion grew that if he found out about my plan, he would immediately warn Eric, his buddy, whom I now considered not only the cause of my pain, but a true traitor. The last thing I needed was for Harry to complicate an already delicate plan to uncover the truth. So, every time he appeared, I had to quickly close the browser windows. By midday, I had finally gathered a few contacts of private investigators specializing in family matters. As soon as I left the office at the end of the day, I called Caitlin. "I found a few detectives, Caitlin," I said, feeling relieved that I could delegate this task to her. "Here, write down their numbers. I think it's best for you to meet them in person and arrange for them to take our case. I need to avoid attracting attention while I'm at work." "Of course, Michael," she replied with a calm, confident voice. "Ted is leaving on a business trip tomorrow, so I'll have time to meet with a detective and discuss everything." I felt the tension ease slightly. After everything that had happened in the past few days, I was comforted by knowing there was someone I could trust with part of this difficult task. When I returned home, the evening with Anna went as many others had. Dinner, talks about daily matters, and a short, genuine laugh from Toby as he shared stories about school. I hid all signs of worry, and Anna seemed unaware of my suspicions. We went to bed, and as she fell asleep beside me, I kept thinking about the next day, knowing much now depended on the private detective. The next evening, as I was heading home, Caitlin called. "Hi, Michael," she said, her voice lively yet slightly anxious. "Everything went great. I met with the detective, and he's already on our case. One of them will be tracking Ted on his trip, so soon we'll know what he's up to away from home. Another one will monitor Anna here, as planned." I sighed, feeling a huge sense of relief, and thanked her sincerely. "Thank you, Caitlin. I know this isn't easy for you, but now we have a plan. Everything will be okay." "Yes, and I'm grateful to you, Michael. Let's just keep supporting each other, okay?" "Of course, Caitlin. We'll get through this," I said, not fully believing my words, but hoping it would give her some reassurance. After hanging up, I stood in silence, contemplating how soon we would have answers. 2 months passed, and my life with Anna continued as if nothing had changed. During this time, I kept my composure, hiding the storm within from those around me and even from myself. Anna and I spent our evenings as usual, dinners, discussing work, Toby's school stories. Sometimes I forgot and almost believed that all my suspicions were just a figment of my imagination, that this nightmare was no more than paranoia. But then I reminded myself why I was doing this. For those moments when Anna would return a bit later than usual, or the way she dressed for work. Meanwhile, Caitlin had already gathered evidence of her husband Ted's infidelity. With the help of the detective I recommended, she had a recording showing him meeting another woman during his business trips. However, she was in no rush to take decisive action. She wanted to wait for the results of the detective's investigation into my case, to have everything clarified completely. I, in turn, focused on gathering information about Eric. The more I learned about his life, his affairs, and his habits, the stronger my resolve became to end this story. I thought about what I would do if I saw proof of betrayal. I planned, almost mentally assembling each step, picturing what I would do once I finally had answers. Yet, in recent weeks, something in Anna's behavior had subtly changed. She began staying at work a bit longer, explaining it as a new project, but I noticed how she avoided meeting my gaze when talking about it. Despite my anxiety, I held back my suspicions, deciding to wait for the detective's report. Then one day, I received a message from him. I somehow felt it was the long-awaited moment and opened it, holding my breath. The detective wrote that he had important information and that we needed to meet. We set a date and time, and I had already planned everything to take a day off while Anna would be at work so I could calmly deal with this matter. That same night, I called Caitlin to inform her about the upcoming meeting. "Caitlin, the detective messaged me saying he has information. We agreed to meet in 2 days. Michael, I'm glad that something is finally going to come to light." She sighed. "Do you mind if I come with you? Ted is going on a business trip again, so I can leave the kids with my parents." "Of course, I'd actually like for you to be there," I replied, and I could hear the gratitude in her voice. "All right, then it's settled. I'll pick you up, and we'll go together." And then the day arrived. Caitlin was already waiting for me outside her house as I pulled up to her porch. She got in the car, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to appear calm. "How are you?" I asked, starting the engine and pulling onto the road. "To be honest, I'm nervous," she replied quietly. "I feel like I already know everything I need to about Ted, but I still hope my suspicions about Anna are wrong." "Thank you for being here with me," I told her, and she rested her hand on mine. I nodded, focusing on the road. Deep down, I hoped this was all just an unfortunate set of coincidences. We drove in silence, but I could feel her support beside me. Caitlin and I sat in the small office of the private detective, surrounded by a stark atmosphere with nothing unnecessary, just plain gray walls, simple furniture, and a desk with neatly arranged folders and papers. The detective, a solid man in his 40s, entered with a serious expression, shook my hand, then Caitlin's, and sat down across from us, looking intently at us both. "Thank you for coming," he began, folding his hands in front of him. "There's news you need to hear, unfortunately. We followed Anna for 2 months, and at first everything appeared completely normal. She went to work, came home, did nothing suspicious." I felt myself tense up, though I tried not to show it. Caitlin let out a quiet breath but kept her gaze on the detective, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "But then, after a month," he continued, "the situation changed. One day, Anna left work during her lunch break and didn't go to her car. Instead, she called a taxi and went—" He paused, emphasizing the importance of his words, "to the Blue River Hotel." My jaw clenched involuntarily. I couldn't take my eyes off the detective as a wave of nausea rose in my chest. He went on. "She stayed at the hotel until the evening, left alone, and went back to pick up her car at work. From then on, similar trips started happening more often. In 1 week alone, she met with her—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "With her lover at least 4 times. All this time, she believed no one would find out." Caitlin began breathing softly, holding back tears, but kept listening, as if entranced. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. "And who is this person?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. The detective looked at me, a hint of understanding in his eyes, as if he realized the blow he was about to deliver. "Her lover is Eric Walker, the owner of Silver Grill," he said calmly. It felt like I'd been slapped in the face. Eric. So it really was him. That restaurant, those late nights. His smile, which I now recalled from that last dinner. And Harry. Now I knew that Harry had been helping this man keep his dirty secret. It was as if someone had pulled a trigger, and the pieces of my life were falling into a bleak picture of betrayal and deceit. The detective handed me a small folder of photographs. "I took some pictures," he explained, pulling one after another from the folder. "Here's Anna and Eric. This one was taken outside the hotel." He showed a photo of my wife standing with Eric, holding him, kissing him openly without a care for who might see. "We also have photos from the hotel." I felt a wave of disgust wash over me as he pulled out another folder and laid out photographs in front of me, showing my wife in a hotel bedroom, with him. Everything was painfully clear. Caitlin covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide in shock. I sat there, stunned, desperately trying to keep my composure. Nausea crept up my throat, and it felt impossible to breathe. "They've been meeting regularly," the detective continued, his gaze never wavering from us. "For at least the last 2 months. Their relationship likely started earlier, but with this level of activity, we've observed them since early last month." I could only nod, unable to say a word. All the evidence lay before me. There was no doubt, and no explanations were necessary. Caitlin and I sat in dead silence for a few more minutes, absorbing everything we had heard. Finally, I managed to say, "Thank you. Thank you for your work." I gathered the photographs, placing them back in the folder, and Caitlin and I rose to leave the detective's office. We stepped outside into the evening air, filled with the sounds of cars and streetlights, and I took a deep breath as if trying to bear the overwhelming weight that had settled on me. We stood together in the cold evening air, surrounded by the sounds of the city. I looked at the photographs in the folder I was holding, but my eyes blurred, and the meaning of what I saw felt unreal. Caitlin seemed to understand what was going on inside me. She moved closer and embraced me, pulling me in, making the pain subside for a brief moment. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she whispered, looking straight into my eyes. Suddenly, an odd, inexplicable tension arose between us, as if everything we'd held inside had burst out. Our faces started to inch closer, and before we realized what was happening, our lips met. We kissed, neither of us even thinking to stop. The pain, the bitterness of betrayal, and the need to feel close to someone guiding us. But eventually, we pulled away, breathless, looking at each other. "We need to make them pay, Michael," Caitlin said firmly, and I nodded in agreement. As we got into the car, I already knew what needed to be done. Over the next few days, we made preparations. I withdrew money from bank accounts, transferred funds to offshore accounts, and stashed cash in a safe place. Caitlin did the same. We wanted to protect ourselves before taking action. On the day of the revelation, everything was ready. I gathered the necessary documents for the divorce, handled the financial matters, and finally headed to the office to deal with one more piece of the plan, Harry. Standing outside his office, I felt waves of anger and determination well up within me. And at that moment, all the hurts and betrayals of the past month filled my soul. Entering the office, I closed the door sharply behind me. Harry, sitting at his desk, looked at me in surprise. "Michael, is something wrong?" he asked, trying to mask a hint of surprise. "Oh, nothing's wrong, Harry," I said, smiling coldly. "I just came to tell you that I'm resigning." His face changed for a brief moment. He clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. "Resigning? Wait, Michael, why are you suddenly deciding to—" But I cut him off. "Suddenly? Are you serious? You knew my wife was cheating on me with your friend, with Eric Walker. You knew and kept quiet. You even helped him behind my back, guiding him as I tried to figure out what was going on. You betrayed me, Harry." Harry went pale, trying to keep his calm. "Michael, let's not jump to conclusions. Sit down, let's talk calmly." But I was no longer listening to him. All the anger I had bottled up exploded outward. "Calmly, are you kidding? You pathetic coward, you hid this from me, looked me in the eye, and even tried to keep me from the truth. You let this circus happen behind my back. You are no friend, not even a decent human being. You're nothing but a worthless coward." I stood there breathing heavily, while Harry tried to say something, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Michael, I understand you're upset, but you're mistaken." Unable to hold back, I spat in his face and then punched him, watching his expression turn into a mix of horror and rage. Leaning in close, I whispered, "Don't ever cross me again. You and your little friend will regret what you've done." And without looking back, I walked out of his office, feeling each step take me to a new level of resolve. I returned home and wasted no time. I gathered all of Anna's belongings, tossing them into trash bags and hauling them outside. The bags filled with her clothes and personal items lay by the doorstep, a symbol of her betrayal. Toby was staying with her parents, and I knew that tonight everything would finally come to light. Sitting in the living room, I waited for Anna to return. I turned off my phone, ensuring no one could interrupt me. Not the detective, not friends, no one. I knew Anna had an important meeting at school today, and it was there she'd be served with the divorce papers. After a short while, I heard the door quietly open. Anna walked in, her face looking both troubled and tense. Our eyes met, and I could see her expression shift to a mixture of rage and shock. Anna stood at the door, her gaze filled with anger and confusion. Barely stepping in, she immediately unleashed her frustration. "Why did you do this? How dare you humiliate me like that? Did you think you could just get rid of me like this?" Her voice grew louder, charged with hysteria. "You have no idea what you've just done." I calmly nodded toward the coffee table, where a folder containing photos taken by the private investigator lay. Anna froze upon seeing the pictures, and her face went pale. She knew now that I had uncovered everything, that her web of lies was completely destroyed. Instead of apologies, she went on the offensive, hoping to intimidate me. "You shouldn't have staged this spectacle, Michael." Her tone was sharp and icy. "Do you think you'll get away with this unscathed?" She took a step forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "I'll take everything from you down to the last penny. You'll be left with nothing, and Toby, he'll be with me too. I'll make sure you're left as nothing, a nobody. You'll regret even thinking of going up against me." I listened to her angry tirades, her torrent of venom and threats, but inside I was already numb. Her words no longer hurt me. Instead, they drew a bitter smirk. I waited until she fell silent, and then, calmly, I asked, "Have you checked your accounts?" Anna froze, not understanding what I meant. Then, frantically, she pulled out her phone, opened her banking app, and seeing the zero balances, turned pale. She looked at me in horror, unable to believe I had cut her off from our finances. You, how did you do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I leaned back in my chair, watching as her confidence slowly crumbled. "I planned for this in advance, Anna. You left me no other choice." She trembled with rage and, somewhat recovering from the shock, continued with mocking malice. "Money isn't everything. Do you even understand that our son will stay with me? You have no idea what I mean to him." For the first time, fear flickered across her face. She looked at me as if searching for an answer. "Are you really sure about that?" I asked, looking directly into her eyes. "Are you certain that Toby would want to stay with you if he knew how you betrayed our family?" Anna shuddered, her face contorted, and she whispered, You told him everything?" "Not yet," I replied calmly. "But believe me, if I have to, I won't stay silent. You've always wanted to be a role model for him, right? Well, I'm certain Toby will choose the one he can trust." Anna seemed to realize that she had lost her last leverage. I saw her gaze turn empty, her anger dissolving into helplessness. At that moment, I caught her look, and memories of our fights flooded back. Moments when her face twisted with anger, when she spoke hurtful words with cold detachment, breaking our bond. The weight of her betrayal filled the emptiness left after the love we once shared. "Tell me, why?" I asked softly, and my voice held no anger, only bitterness. "Why did you cheat on me?" Anna sneered, her face contorting again in anger. "Because you bored me, Michael," she spat. "Life with you was dull, boring, with your endless ideas, with all this monotony. I needed something else, something exciting. And I'd wanted to leave you for a long time if it weren't for our son. You were just an obstacle, but—" She leaned closer and added with a sneering glint in her eyes, "But you were so convenient to hold on to. You were good, reliable, Michael, always dependable." Each of her words was a blow, but I didn't let her see how they affected me. Now I knew for certain that she was a stranger to me. Everything I once felt for her was gone, leaving only emptiness. "I see no point in talking further with you, Anna. You betrayed our family, trampled everything we had," I said coldly. "Get out of my house. I threw all your things out. They're at the door. If you don't take them by tomorrow, they'll be at the dump." She hissed, barely containing her rage. "This is my home too, Michael." "Do you think I'll just walk away?" I replied with calm indifference. "There's no place for a betrayer in this house. Leave." Anna turned pale, looked back at the door, and before stepping out, cast a scornful look at me, hissing, "You'll regret this, Michael. You'll regret it." With that, she slammed the door, leaving me in the deafening silence. Several months had passed, and the divorce with Anna was finally completed. I sold our house and we split the proceeds evenly, as the law required, though it stung to see her touch any part of what we had built together. But to my relief, our son Toby decided to stay with me. He was angry at his mother for her betrayal, and despite her desperate attempts to win him back, remained by my side, putting a final end to our relationship. Caitlin also saw things through to the end. She got her divorce, keeping the house, custody of the children, and nearly all of their assets. Ted was left broken, destitute, and forced to start anew, almost from scratch, left alone with his mistakes. During this time, Caitlin and I grew much closer. Our past bound us together stronger than any promises. We both had been through betrayal and found strength in each other. Our children became friends, almost like siblings. It felt only logical and natural to become a true family where there was room for love, trust, and support, things I hadn't felt in a long time. A few months after our divorces were finalized, Caitlin and I decided to sell her house. We both felt that staying in this city, living under the shadow of the past, was unbearable. So we decided to start fresh somewhere new. We bought a cozy home in a small, picturesque town where no one knew us or our story. Shortly after moving, we set about making this new place our own, turning it into a home where Caitlin, the kids, and I could all feel happy. A year of living together flew by. We realized we wanted to spend our lives together, and soon I proposed to Caitlin. The wedding took place with just family and close friends, in our own backyard, decorated with lanterns and flowers. It was an incredible evening. For the first time in a long time, I felt free, truly happy. The children laughed, running around the garden, while Caitlin and I held hands, feeling complete. A few months after the wedding, on a Sunday morning, I sat with my coffee, scrolling through the news. One article caught my attention. The headline screamed, "Famous Silver Grill restaurant shut down after major inspection, violations and pests found." As I read further, I saw that the restaurant owner, Eric Walker, had been forced to close the place after numerous complaints about unsanitary conditions, cockroaches, and other violations uncovered by inspectors. I smirked, remembering my promise that Eric would regret ruining my family. It seemed life had already decided it was time for payback, hitting him where he least expected. Reading on, I also found out that soon after the restaurant's closure, Eric ended up in the hospital. The reason was serious injuries sustained in a bar fight after someone recognized him and brought up old debts and connections. Apparently, his reputation as a fraud and dishonest man had finally caught up with him. By that time, Anna was also going through hard times. Alone, she returned to live with her parents. The idea of rebuilding her old life was out of the question. Everyone in town knew about her affair. She continued teaching, but her colleagues no longer treated her with the same respect as before, and whispers of her past followed her. Over time, she noticeably gained weight and began leading a reckless lifestyle, dating various men, none of whom took her seriously. Shortly after the truth about their affair surfaced, Eric severed all ties with her, unwilling to continue with someone who had been only a fleeting amusement. Scrolling further, I felt a strange calm. All these people who had shattered our families faced their consequences, and I no longer needed to look back. I took a deep breath, closed my laptop, and heard Caitlin bustling in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the kids, who were already up and asking their morning questions. I got up and headed toward them, feeling the warm morning sunlight filling our home with new memories I knew would stay with us for years. I walked up to her from behind, hugged her gently, and said, "I love you." She replied, "And I love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me."